ASMR review show. So, for this episode, I'm going to be talking about a very excellent film franchise. Mission Impossible. So, I have the first four on DVD. I do not have a physical copy of the fifth one yet, but I did see it when it was in theaters, so I will still give my thoughts on that one. So, I am going to try and avoid spoilers if possible, but some may naturally come up. So, when I edit this video, I will put in a spoiler alert on the bottom for those of you who don't want to get spoiled. And I'll try to give good warning. But if you haven't seen any of these, I recommend that you watch them all because they are all very well made films. So, let's start at the beginning. I'm only going to be talking about the full-length theatrical films. I have not seen the original TV show. I heard it was good, but let's face it, the films are where it's at. So, this little box that I have right here was released just before Mission Impossible 3 came out in 2007, and it is Mission Impossible 1 and MI2 together. It's a little difficult to get out of the box. At least, without being too loud, because that would defeat the purpose of this video. Here we go. Mission Impossible 1. Or just Mission Impossible, whatever you prefer. So, this was released in 1996. It was, my knowledge has not failed me yet. So, the Mission Impossible franchise follows the adventures of the spy Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise. And he is part of the IMF, which is not the International Monetary Fund. It is the Impossible Mission Force. So, each one sort of has a different feel and style to it because they all have different directors, which I like the way that franchise works. It's kind of similar to something like James Bond. But I would say that Mission Impossible most of the time tends to be a bit more serious, less stylized than Bond. I guess I can't really say that recently with the Daniel Craig Bonds, but old school classic James Bond. So, in the first Mission Impossible, the main plot is that Ethan Hunt is considered to be, he is mistaken for a mole in the spy agency. So he is on the run to prove his innocence and also track down who set him up. And despite all the other films that have come out, I still think that this one is my favorite of the franchise because it is built more on drawing out a suspenseful scene rather than straight up action moments. Like in this film, there are no gunfights or shootouts or any big set piece moments like that. The main scene is a scene where the characters have to infiltrate the CIA, and there's no music. It's very quiet, built just on the suspense alone. And I still think that is one of the best scenes in the franchise. So I like it stylistically for that. And it was also directed by Brian De Palma, who some of you may know from films like Scarface or Blowout. I think he's a very underrated director, and this showcases his talent for suspenseful scenes. So, next on the box set is MI2. I guess the shortened title was the way of making it more cool and hip, because this movie is a lot more straightforward and action-oriented, and it is directed by John Woo, who is a very famous, I believe he's Japanese. I think he's Japanese. I'm not sure. I don't want to commit to that because I might be wrong. But in any case, he is foreign, and he makes very great action movies, such as the film Hard Boiled, which has a really great shootout at the end. So, Mission Impossible 2 is more of a straightforward action film, and I think a lot of people really don't like it or look back on it because they compare it to almost like a parody or a ripoff of a James Bond film. But I don't know if I would go as to say it's a bad movie. I still really enjoy this, and I think I might actually put it on the same level as Mission Impossible 3, which I'll talk more about when we get to that. Because Mission Impossible 2, it has a little bit of a slow start, but when it gets down to it, there's awesome motorcycle chases. They are filmed very well. There's a lot of great stunt work. There's explosions and gunfights, and if you want an action movie, this movie delivers on that. There's a bit of a forced romance, it's kind of cheesy, but the bad guy is very despicably evil, and, the movie makes it so you don't like him and you want to see Ethan defeat him. So, I would say that it is a little bit more misunderstood in that way. I'm not saying it is the best, because it's not. It probably is the worst of them, but I wouldn't say it's a bad film. It's still enjoyable. And the action scenes are very well filmed. So. Next up is MI3, or Mission Impossible 3. I guess they were still continuing the cool hip trend of the shortened title. So, this was directed by J.J. Abrams, who is now, worldwide famous for making the Star Trek reboot and Star Wars The Force Awakens. And this was his first feature-length film, if I recall correctly. I think he had only done short films and episodes of Lost, or did he work on Alias? I never watched that show, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, I think the best part about this movie is Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain, because he's definitely the strongest villain out of all of the films so far. And the reason why I'm normally not the biggest fan of the film is I'm not really a fan of the style, the way it was filmed. I think because with J.J. Abrams being new to feature-length filmmaking, there's a lot of very close-up, shaky cam shots in the action scenes. There's a car chase sort of near the start of the third act that does not hold up well. There are some cool stunts in it, but it's not very filmed well, and I think that was because this was the very modern look that most filmmakers who were doing action movies were trying to go for, because the Jason Bourne trilogy had just become a hit with The Bourne Supremacy in 2005, and The Bourne Ultimatum also came out the same year in 2007. And since Paul Greengrass did that style so well, most of the directors were trying to emulate it. But I don't think they do it as well as him. but it still has an interesting story. There's a bit more connection with the character of Ethan Hunt, because in this one he has a girlfriend played by Michelle Monaghan, so there's a bit more character dynamic between that. And there still are some very good set-piece moments, as there always are. Tom Cruise doesn't skimp out on the stunts for the Mission Impossible films. And then the last one that I have a physical copy of right now is Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I guess for this they decided to go more laid back and drop the number, so it's not technically Mission Impossible 4. So, this one, until Rogue Nation came out, was probably my second favorite, because this one was directed by Brad Bird, who had originally only done animated films like The Iron Giant, Ratatouille, or The Incredibles. But I think he has a very good knack for filming action scenes, and this movie has basically gone down in history as the scene where Tom Cruise climbs on the side of the tallest tower in the world, the Dubai Tower. And yes, that scene is amazing. It is incredibly well shot, and it is very suspenseful, and I'm always on the edge of my seat when I watch it, even though I know what's going to happen. And that scene alone pretty much makes the movie. The only thing I can say why I'm not in love with this as much as everyone else is that the villain and the overall plot of the story of what's trying to be accomplished by the characters isn't particularly interesting, and it's not very inventive. It's just some foreign European guy who wants to start nuclear war, and so he has nuclear launch codes. I've never seen that before. But the style of this film makes up for it, and I think it was also a good balance of lighthearted comedy and seriousness. And having Simon Pegg in more of a supporting role was definitely a good decision, because he is a very great actor. So, I don't have a physical copy of Rogue Nation yet, since I've only seen it in theaters. But even though that was several months ago, I still do remember the film very well, and I can give my thoughts about it. I feel that that is currently my second favorite out of the franchise, because it was a bit more serious than Ghost Protocol, but it still had very great action set pieces. There were a few scenes that are almost like, they aren't callbacks to the first Mission Impossible, but they follow that same style of suspense and tension slowly building, rather than a straight-up action scene. So I like that the franchise was sort of going back to that, because that was why the first Mission Impossible was my favorite. And there still are a lot of straight-up action scenes. There's a very well-done motorcycle chase, which I guess that almost puts the motorcycle chase in Mission Impossible 2 to shame, because it feels a bit more real, rather than, a lot of crazy jousting motorcycles like in Mission Impossible 2. And there is one actress, I think her name is Rebecca Ferguson. I will fact check that below. But she does a really great job in the film of playing a spy whose allegiance you don't truly know. So she did a good job of that. And then there wasn't really any much for negatives that I had about the film. I think Simon Pegg has a little less screen time than in Ghost Protocol, so I guess I could say that. The villain in this movie is a lot more interesting than the villain from Ghost Protocol. He's very creepy, very intense, and he has a moment near the end of the film, which I won't spoil, but needless to say it was a scene where, I thought any other villain would act a certain way and maybe, back down a little bit or show some weakness. But this villain just decided to stand tall and act out through this situation without any fear. And that made that scene very chilling. So I would highly recommend Rogue Nation. I think what am I trying to say? I think that it's very impressive that a franchise is already at its 5th film, and we are, I guess, about 20 years in now, since the first one came out in 96, and yet it's still going strong. So that is definitely a very impressive feat, because not a lot of franchises can manage that. So, final thoughts to wrap up this video. I guess I'll just give my ranking for each one for those of you that are interested. So, since the first Mission Impossible is my favorite, and it is quite the suspense thriller where I haven't seen a lot of other films like it, I would probably give that one a 9 out of 10. Mission Impossible 2, I guess it's kind of more of a guilty pleasure of mine because I enjoy the cheesiness or the over-the-top elements, but those are elements that I know most people probably don't want and are just sort of going to groan at. So I'll be a little more harsh on Mission Impossible 2, and I'll give that one a 6 out of 10. But it does score a lot of points for having very well-shot action sequences. And Mission Impossible 3, I guess, even though earlier I said I'd put them on the same, I'll bump that one up a little bit more. I'll give that one a 7 out of 10. Because despite the fact that it is not a necessarily well-directed film, it does have a bit more of a good story to it, and the character dynamic does help. Plus, Philip Seymour Hoffman is the best villain that the franchise has had. So, Ghost Protocol, I would bump that one up a little more, and then I would give that one an 8 out of 10. Because it's just a very fun, enjoyable film, and that is just sort of more well-rounded. And despite the fact that I would say I like Rogue Nation better than Ghost Protocol, I would still give that one an 8 out of 10 because, I'm not going to overrate it. I mean, it is a very well-made action movie with great scenes, but, I can't just give it a perfect score because of that. There has to be a little bit more substance to it, like Mission Impossible 1, which was a great suspense thriller, but it didn't have to have a bunch of, car chases or shootouts or anything like that. So, those are my thoughts on the Mission Impossible franchise. I have not been paying attention to social media to figure out what is going to happen next. But if they decide to make another one, then I'll probably go see it, because it'll probably be good. But Tom Cruise, that guy needs to relax a bit. The stunt scene in Rogue Nation where he's strapped to the side of a plane, and how old is he now? Like 50 or something? Like, that's pretty intense. I don't think I'll ever be able to do that when I'm 50. I probably can't even do that now. So, yeah. I really enjoy this franchise a lot. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but they're all great films. Very fun to watch. I watch them a lot. Maybe, if anyone is interested, I will talk about the Jason Bourne franchise, since that is a similar spy espionage related one. And there is a 5th one coming out later this year, so that'll probably be a good topic. Maybe I'll wait to make that until the movie actually comes out, though, so that I can include my thoughts for that in that. Unless the 4 people that are watching this video tell me that they want it right away, in which case I will get on that. But that's a topic for Impossible movies because they are good fun.